Hello and welcome to this Aerospace Testing International podcast. I'm Ben Sampson, and in this episode I chat to Jason Chua, co-founder and COO of Universal Hydrogen, a hydrogen logistics company for aviation based in California that was founded last year. Just during this past month, April, the company has raised more than $20 million in funding. Hydrogen logistics may sound a bit industrial and conjure up images of pipelines and tanks, but Universal Hydrogen has big ambitions. Not only is it developing modular hydrogen storage and infrastructure tech for transporting hydrogen fuel to aircraft, it's also working on a retrofit kit to modify regional airplanes to run off hydrogen. I talked to Jason about both programs, the scale of the challenge facing his company, and the challenge aviation in general faces to decarbonise, and why he thinks hydrogen is the answer. Jason, you're co-founder and COO of Universal. Do you call it Universal or Universal Hydrogen?
We call it Universal Hydrogen. If we want to abbreviate, sometimes we call it UH2 because H2, of course, is the molecular formula for hydrogen.
Sure.
So UH2.
UH2. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's what I'll do from now on. Could you? It's quite a new startup, right? Could you tell me a little bit about the company first off, and how you've come to found it and be COO?
Yeah, of course. So Universal Hydrogen has been around for about a year, and our goal is to decarbonize the skies, right? We want to transition the industry to hydrogen-powered aviation, and we're doing that by sort of fixing or addressing the two remaining gaps in the hydrogen value chain for aviation. So that's on two fronts, right? There's the value chain for the hydrogen molecule itself. Mm-hmm. How do you get hydrogen fuel to airports? Of course, if you think about hydrogen as a gas, as a commodity, right? There's an increasing number of hydrogen producers that are hitting the market, especially as we have renewable projects coming online. And so it's a really great pair to wind projects, solar projects, things like that. So there's a lot of hydrogen supply. And we think there could be a lot of hydrogen demand in aviation, but there's really no good way to get the hydrogen from the point of production to the point of consumption without building a lot of very expensive pipelines or custom tanker trucks that are really, really cold, or on-site airport storage, or lots of things like that, right? We estimate that it's several $1 billion per airline per airport to sort of build out that infrastructure. So anyway, a lot of money. We wanted to make it easier for people to do it and also a lot faster. And so we've created this modular hydrogen capsule solution. And it's designed specifically to get transported on the intermodal freight network. So you can sort of think of it as Nespresso pods, right? It's one analogy that we sometimes use, right? You have the coffee, you put in these little pods, you can put those pods in a box and ship them all around the world. And then you just pop into the coffee maker, which of course brings me to the second part of the second parallel value chain, right? Which is of course hydrogen-powered aircraft. It does no good to you if you have hydrogen at the airport if you have nothing to use it. And so we're, of course, putting together the components and doing certification for a hydrogen fuel cell powertrain for a regional turboprop. And so, again, this is sort of a space where fuel cells exist, electric motors exist. Obviously, airframes exist, right? And so we're putting those things together, wrapping a lot of really interesting certification work around it to make sure that this is as safe or safer than existing power plants. And ultimately, our goal is to get a 40 to 50 seat regional turboprop, something on the order of a Dash 8 or ATR 72, certified to fly and in service by 2025. And so that's sort of the second leg of things. So two things: hydrogen storage and transportation. And then the second one is a certified aircraft powertrain culminating in a conversion kit for regional turboprops that will fly in 2025.
Sure. And you mentioned both things in parallel there, that you've got the infrastructure challenge, which you have this modular capsule delivery infrastructure system, and then the retrofit of the retrofit of the aircraft to run on hydrogen. Do you actually have both programs running at the same time in parallel? Are you planning to do both at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we think that if you think about other industries, for example, automotive, right, that have been transformed in sort of the decarbonization way, right? How is Tesla successful? I think that's sort of the big success story in the EV space. How are they successful? They weren't the first to create EVs, right? EVs had been around for a couple of decades by the time Tesla came around. They weren't the first to invent batteries. But the thing that's special about Tesla, I think, is they took a value stream approach, right? They looked across the entire ecosystem. They looked at what the gaps were, and then they addressed all those gaps in parallel. And that's, I think, ultimately why they were sort of the major movers in that space. So they invested in energy storage technology, which is batteries. They invested in a charging and distribution system, which is their supercharger network. And they also happened to start with a retrofit product, right? Turning the Lotus Elise into the first Tesla Roadster. We're taking a very similar approach. It's sort of coincidentally, but we really believe that that's the right approach, because you can't solve any one legs of the stool, because you need three legs for the stool to stand, right? And so that's why we're doing all three things in parallel.
Okay, so it's quite an ambitious program. I mean, where are you at the moment? Let's take the infrastructure part first. I mean, where are you with that at the moment? Have you got a working system? Have you tested it? Is it?
Yeah. So on the infrastructure piece, on the hydrogen storage piece, we have built a couple sort of subscale prototypes of our hydrogen modules. We're very close to being done with their first couple full scale modules for both liquid hydrogen and for gaseous hydrogen. And the goal over the next few months is to build several of these and run them through all sorts of testing, so they're certification ready. So we're making quite a bit of progress on that front.
Okay, so when it's transported to hydrogen, just to clarify this in my mind, Jason, sorry, when it's transported, is it just transported as what state is the hydrogen in? Is it some sort of high pressure vessel?
Yeah, so we have actually both. So there are two ways that you can transport hydrogen: either high pressure gas, as you're mentioning, or liquid, right? Mm-hmm. And we're actually working on both, because we think both are going to be usable by airlines in different scenarios, right? So gaseous can cover about 75% of the missions that regional turboprops fly, and then you would need liquid for the extra long missions that these aircraft fly. And so we're working on both, and so they're progressing sort of in similar timescales, and we'll be ready by the time the aircraft powertrain and conversion kit is certified.
Okay, great. I mean, hydrogen is no emissions at the point of use, but during its production, it can be, it can create emissions and have an impact on the environment. I mean, what kind of work are you guys doing to make sure that it's produced in a sustainable way?
Yeah, we're very committed to making sure that as we are sort of transitioning the industry to what we believe is the future clean fuel for aviation, we're not creating sort of some problems upstream, right? And so we've actually worked with different hydrogen producers. The one that we've announced publicly is a partnership with Plug Power to take offtake of green hydrogen from them. And so we believe that we've come to a really interesting point in the development of the hydrogen ecosystem, where because of the flood of renewables that are hitting the grid, the sort of improvements in technology around, especially PEM technology, proton exchange membrane technology, for water electrolysis into hydrogen. The cost of green hydrogen is coming down really, really, really rapidly, so much so that by 2025, we believe that it's going to be at cost parity, if not cheaper, on a per seat mile basis or per seat kilometer basis to operate a hydrogen powered aircraft. As it would be to operate a traditionally powered aircraft.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, great. So let's talk just quickly about the fuel cell system that's going to be fitted onto the aircraft, these regional aircraft at first. If that's running in parallel at the moment, I mean, how's the development for that going? What's the kind of timeline? What details can you give me about that, please?
Yeah, so it's we're doing really well on that front also. So one of the strategic decisions that we've made early on, right, is that we don't want to have to rely on technological leaps in order for this thing to become a reality. We want this to be a reality as soon as possible, and we are excited because the technological bricks actually exist today. They're mature technologies. And so, in the same way that we're taking a mature hydrogen production sort of ecosystem and leveraging that with a mature intermodal freight distribution network to get hydrogen to airports, we're taking mature fuel cell technology, mature electric motor technology, and of course, existing airframes, and we're integrating them into sort of a hydrogen fuel cell powertrain. And so we actually have our first ground demonstration Ironbird running with a fuel cell connected to hydrogen, connected to electric motor turning propeller. So we've actually run that a couple of times. we're going to be bringing that up in power levels and going to be at the 1 megawatt level by the end of the year. And then shortly thereafter, we'll get to sort of our target power class, which is 2 megawatts, put it on an aircraft, and we should start test flying in 2023 or thereabouts with a full-size regional turboprop.
That's rapid progress, right? So you must be really pleased with that. And that comes perhaps from you just announced that you've acquired or you've announced a deal with, was it Plug Power recently? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's correct. So Plug Power, they've been sort of long time leaders in the fuel cell and hydrogen space in the US. And so we're really excited to be partnering with them because not only are they, I think they have probably the most hours in terms of fuel cells in usage of any company out there, right? And certainly they have the largest market cap out there of a hydrogen related company. So they really know what they're talking about when it comes to fuel cells. They've sort of partnered with us in the aviation vertical because they see that as a really interesting expansion territory for them. But they also have just made some acquisitions around hydrogen production. And so we're excited to partner with them on that as well. So we're really excited to help work with them to grow the hydrogen economy and make hydrogen aviation a reality in the very near term.
So, from what I remember reading, don't they do fuel cells for forklift trucks normally? Is that right?
Yeah, so that's sort of where they're starting, but they're sort of expanding into a lot of other verticals, including aviation.
Yeah. So I mean, how does that work? I mean, how closely are you working with those guys? Do they bring their expertise and knowledge across, and they're working on the Ironbird? And I'm just trying to get a picture in my head. Is it just a case of sticking fuel cell in there and off you fly, or it's a bit more complex?
Yeah, no. So it is a bit more complex than that, right? And they've been really engaged. So we have at least weekly meetings with their team, and so they're providing the fuel cell expertise. They know fuel cells better than everyone, right? Than anyone. And we come from a pretty deep bench of aviation talent, as I'm sure you probably know, right? Our founding team, we all came from United Technologies most recently, but our CEO Paul was a chief technology officer there, and also was the chief technology officer at Airbus in the past. Our CTO today, JP, he's been a professor of aerospace engineering for the past several decades. He was actually Paul's professor. I worked at United Technologies and Airbus. John, the fourth co-founder, has also worked at UTC, Airbus, and also some other aerospace startups. So we spent quite a bit of time in aviation, and so that's sort of the expertise that we bring to the table. And Plug Power brings their fuel cell expertise, and so together we've been able to make a lot of modifications that are sort of putting us on the path to getting these fuel cells flight worthy and certifiable and safe and to the power levels that we need to power a reasonable sized aircraft.
Right, and you mentioned UTC there, and that's who you worked for last, and before then at the Airbus A3 thing. Yeah, but you so has there been a kind of switch in thinking? I mean, you was into kind of hybrid electric stuff, right, at UTC and Project 804 and that kind of thing. So can you explain to me why have you sort of kind of switched to thinking in terms of, or you and Paul or whoever switched to thinking about hydrogen in terms of aviation instead of hybrid electric? Because we're seeing both routes in the sector at the moment, aren't we? People pursuing both routes. Do you think hydrogen? Why do you think hydrogen is the answer and not a hybrid electric approach?
Well, so I think both. Well, I guess all of us, right? We all sort of left UTC around the same time in conjunction with the Raytheon merger, and when we left, we really took that opportunity to ask ourselves, well, what are some things that we couldn't do within a large aerospace company that we feel are really important? And one thing that's become really clear to us is that it's really difficult for large aerospace companies to create disruptive innovation within their own four walls. And so I think hybrid electric, I think it's good incremental progress. But at the end of the day, we're strong believers that hydrogen is going to be the future fuel for aviation, and that the technology to make that happen exists today. And we just did not see a path for these large companies to make that happen under their own volition. There are too many other things that they're trying to maintain and grow in terms of product lines and different things like that. And so we wanted to take it upon ourselves to say, you know what, we know the space. We have a strong vision and mission of what we want to do, which is to decarbonize aviation. And we know we can do this. So let's do it from the outside and work with these people, and we work with our former colleagues, many of whom are friends, right? To figure out how we can take the things that we're incubating, developing outside, and actually getting them into mainline products, like eventually single aisle aircraft, which is sort of the ultimate ambition of where we're headed in aviation.
Yeah, it's often the kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's almost like an established kind of trope that big companies like Airbus and Boeing can't work as fast as a startup in areas like that. I mean, are you finding, you obviously seem to be working very, very quickly. I mean, but also at the same time, certifying this kind of technology, especially new technology, is extremely hard, isn't it? I mean, is there anything that is kind of, that, what's the big challenge in your mind that you think the company is going to come to within the next year? What are the kind of key milestones? What are the kind of things that make you think, oh my God, are we really going to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit one of the nails on the head, right? It's because no matter what we do, we want to make sure, and we have to make sure that it's safe, right? Because safety it's always the number one priority, right? And so to that end, right, we're engaging very deeply with regulators. We have onboarded a bunch of certification and safety experts onto our team. We actually have a couple of folks from formerly of the FAA on our advisory board. So Lourdes Maurice, who is the chief scientist and executive director of the Office of Environment and Energy, is on our team, as well as Carl Burleson, who is one of the most recent deputy administrators of the FAA. And so they've been advising us on how we can use the regulations and treat the FAA not as a black box that we throw something into the abyss and hope something comes out, but actually work very constructively with them. And as you can imagine, our founding team has a lot of expertise in sort of working with the FAA and understanding how to get things certified. And so that's sort of the number one. I wouldn't say that it's a challenge, but it's something that we know that we have to do because that's the right thing to do. And also it's a necessary thing to do. And that's, I think, sort of what's gating our timeline. But at the same time, we believe that we have the expertise in-house to do it. And we believe that our timeline is very credible.
So you're engaging with the regulators already. That's great. I mean, that's a really great sign. And you have your market firmly in mind for this as well, the regional market, which is great as well. We touched upon it briefly just now. I mean, do you see hydrogen as the only fuel that aviation eventually uses, or is just, will there be a mix of fuels in the future, do you think?
So I think in the near term, there's going to be a mix of fuels, right? I think, certainly I can't promise that we're going to have a hydrogen powered aircraft that's certified that flies, a reasonable amount of people a reasonable distance, like next year, right? That seems a little aggressive, given that we need to make sure that everything's safe to fly. And so, in the next few years, I think biofuels and other things like that will be important parts of the mix as we work to decarbonize the sector slowly. But in the long term, we strongly believe that all the way up to single aisle aircraft and perhaps beyond, hydrogen is a really good solution. We've actually done some paper studies that show that you can fly the same mission profiles that you can with the longest range single aisle aircraft today, with sort of a reasonable geometry. Of course, we're not planning to design the next single aisle aircraft, right? That's sort of Airbus and Boeing and to some extent Comac's job, right? Yeah. But I think we've seen that Airbus has been quite vocal about their view that hydrogen is a reasonable fuel to look at for their next single aisle. We share that view, and we're working to help reduce Airbus's risk, right? Because I think if you ask them what the biggest questions that they have is, well, how do they get fuel to the different airports? How do they make sure that airlines are actually willing to adopt this? And so by going after the regional turboprop segment first, and sort of getting our fuel distribution system up and running and online and in use by 2025, many of the operators that operate regional turboprops of sort of the Dash 8 or ATR 72 variety, they're also Airbus and Boeing customers, right? And so when they are going to make the decision about their next single aisle programs, they'll be able to ask their customers, hey, you used hydrogen in the past, you've used this modular fuel distribution system, like, what do you think? Would you be interested in that? Do you believe the infrastructure is ready? Do you believe that the technology is ready? Do you believe that this is the right fuel to use? And we believe the answer will be a resounding yes, which will tip the scales, in favor of hydrogen being sort of the only solution for single aisle flight.
Okay, just a couple more questions, Jason. Thanks for your time. I'm just wondering, I mean, for it to be successful as well, it has to be right for the market in terms of cost, doesn't it? I mean, are you confident?
Absolutely.
Yeah, are you confident you can hit those your targets to make it not just desirable in terms of, this is a green option to run your airplane, but also in terms of cost?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest criteria. So before we sort of launched into full bore ahead and doing a lot of engineering and analysis and prototyping, we did the economic analysis, right? Because if it doesn't make sense on from a dollars and cents or from a green in your pocket perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's never gonna take off in the way that we want to, and we're gonna just end up trying to roll a boulder up a hill. But as I talked about earlier, we've seen the price trend. So if you take a look at third-party studies like Bloomberg and NEF's model around the cost of green hydrogen over the next decade or so, there's a very steep decline. We've asked hydrogen producers if they believe that curve, and if they do believe that curve, we've asked them, hey, will you commit to supplying us X volumes, this many kilograms or this many tons of hydrogen in 2024 or 2025 at this price point? And the answer has been yes, right? And so that's why we have firm offtake agreements with hydrogen producers such as Plug Power to provide hydrogen at those costs in those timelines. And we've also done the analysis around, well, what do those prices mean in terms of a cost per seat mile or cost per seat kilometer basis for airlines? And the answer is that it's actually the same or lower than it would be to power an aircraft conventionally.
Okay, great. That's interesting to know. Thanks. I'm really impressed by the speed at which you're working at in what's been achieved in the last year. Obviously there's a lot to do before 2025, but you must be scaling up really rapidly to hit these targets, right? And you must be the busiest man in the world, right? As chief operations officer. What's the kind of plan? How many employees are you at the moment, and how big do you think the company will get within the next short term 3-5 years?
That's a really good question, because it's funny that you say short term 3 to 5 years. For me, the short term is like next 3 to 5 weeks. And so right now we're at about a dozen people, sort of like working on this full time in house. Besides that, we have maybe 50 people at partner organizations that we've worked with in the past that are sort of helping us staff as we staff up the team. Our in-house headcount should roughly triple over the next 3 to 5 months. So talking about the very near term, and we expect to double or triple every year thereafter until we hit the market. But we certainly are quite busy. But it's a lot of really exciting things that are happening, right? Hardware's coming together. We're starting to do some testing. We have some good partnerships that we haven't yet announced that we should be announcing soon, and some really great news on the horizon. Our team that we've built so far has been great, right? The founding team, I think, is they're folks that are really like working with, and I think they have an incredible amount of expertise to bring to the table. Our strategic advisory board, I mentioned the folks from the FAA. We also have some senior Airbus executives that have joined. And also we've added a chief commercial officer, Rod Williams, who's run programs at Bombardier, including a lot of the with a lot of the same customers and a lot of the same airframes that we're working with today. And so that's bringing us a lot of credibility and certainly helping us inform our commercial strategy. And so making a lot of good progress there. But yeah, I think right now we're in scale up mode, not only from a hardware perspective, but from a team perspective. But at the same time, right, I think we all feel this urgency, right? Aviation's not going to decarbonize itself. We have a very limited amount of time that we a small window that we have to sort of make progress, since these are such long-lived assets. And air travel, I think, as we probably all feel right now, like we want to get out there, we want to go travel, we want to visit friends and family, we want to explore new places. And that's important to be able to do, but we want to make sure that people can do that without growing their carbon footprints. And that's why we're so fanatically passionate about doing the things that we're doing today, right? Is decarbonizing aviation through hydrogen fuel, and doing that with existing technologies, doing that in the near term, going after large aircraft, and also solving the challenge on sort of the ecosystem level, not just thinking about powertrains, but also about how do you actually get the fuel to the airports.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Just to finish up, just so that I can understand it correctly. Just so that so in the past, I think a key problem with hydrogen, particularly in the automotive sector, was getting that infrastructure in. That's why we didn't see hydrogen's widespread take up as a fuel, or perhaps you have in California. I'm not too sure, but so your solution is to deliver the infrastructure as well as the as well as the hydrogen aircraft, right? So you're doing both. That's what you're doing. That's quite impressive, right? That's okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, right? Because you can't just do one thing. You got to do everything.
Okay, cool. All right. So is there anything else you want to mention at the moment, Jason? Are you desperate for aerospace testing engineers to come and work for you, or maybe you will be in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. We like I said, we're tripling the size of the team in the next few months. So if you don't see a job that's interesting to you today that's posted, you may see that come online in the next few weeks. So please keep an eye out, and we're always happy to have more talent and more partners. And even if you don't come to work with us, I think we want to make sure, like, there's certainly growing interest in the space, and we think that we welcome all comers, because we think that it's going to take a whole community to make the switch over to a greener fuel. And so we want to, of course, lead that change, but we're happy to work with the group to make it happen.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thanks for your time, Jason. Cheers.
Thanks, Ben.
Have a great day.
Okay, so my thanks again to Jason for chatting to me. I don't know about you, but I found it really interesting to hear about this company and another that's backing hydrogen as the long-term solution to decarbonising aviation. In my opinion, it's a lack of infrastructure that's always held back hydrogen's more widespread use. At least it did in the UK with automotive. So developing a distribution system and the propulsion system at the same time makes good sense. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that, and be sure to subscribe and listen to our next episode where I talk to eVTOL developer Brandon Robertson from Horizon Aircraft in Canada.